At my son's wedding in front of over 300 guests, his father-in-law humiliated me as a dirty mechanic. I stood there still holding a ribbon when my own son said, "Dad, you're embarrassing me." I walked out thinking I had lost everything. But 3 days before that, I had overheard a conversation that should have warned me. And in that moment, I began planning how to make them pay. I truly appreciate you being here with me today. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from right now. Drop your city or country in the comments so I can see how far this story reaches. Just a quick note, some details are adapted for storytelling. Any similarities are coincidental, but the message remains meaningful and worth hearing. I stood in front of 300 guests holding a 6-year-old's ribbon, watching my son choose his future in-laws over me. The moment froze the chandelier light, catching white silk in my hand, Emma's small face crumpling with tears. 300 pairs of eyes locked on me like I was the problem. Behind me, Tyler stood at the altar beside his bride, and I could feel his stare burning into my back. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The ceremony had started 15 minutes earlier at the Sterling Grand Hotel. Tyler, my 30-year-old son, stood in a navy suit that probably cost more than my truck payment, looking nervous but happy. Vanessa, his bride, was 27 and stunning in white, the kind of beautiful that makes you think of magazine covers. The ballroom was packed with 300 guests, all dressed in their finest, sitting in neat rows beneath crystal chandeliers. I sat in the third row, not the front that was reserved for immediate family. And Marcus Caldwell, Vanessa's father, had made it clear that didn't include me. I'd put on my best suit and told myself it didn't matter. What mattered was Tyler. The officiant had just started talking about love when Emma the flower girl, Vanessa's 6-year-old niece, dropped her ribbon. It fluttered to the floor and rolled toward my feet. Her face crumpled immediately, that pre-cry scrunch every parent recognizes. 300 people were watching her, and she was 6 and terrified. I didn't think. I just stood, walked forward, and picked it up. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, quietly kneeling beside her. "It's okay. Look good as new." She blinked at me, tears threatening. "You want me to tie it for you?" She nodded. I took her small wrist and tied the ribbon in a gentle bow. My hands, rough from 40 years of fixing engines, looked enormous next to hers, but I was careful. I'd learned to be careful with fragile things when Tyler was born. I said, "Perfect." Emma smiled through her tears. "Thank you." A soft awe rippled through the crowd. A few people chuckled warmly. For a second, I felt like maybe I belonged here after all. I glanced at Tyler. He was smiling at me, a real smile, the kind that said, "That's my dad." Then Marcus Caldwell moved. He came like a freight train, 62 years old, expensive suit cologne, so strong I could taste it. His face was red jaw tight. "Get your hands off her." I stood fast. "I was just helping. I know what you were doing." Marcus stepped between me and Emma, his body a wall. "You're not a guest here, Thomas. You're just hired help." The room went dead silent. 300 people holding their breath. "I'm Tyler's father," I said, keeping my voice steady, even though my hands had started shaking. "You're a mechanic," Marcus said, spitting the word like it was poison. "This is a respectable wedding, and you're embarrassing everyone with your grease-stained blue-collar touching." I looked down at my hands. They were clean. I'd scrubbed them twice that morning. But Marcus wasn't talking about dirt. He was talking about who I was. I looked past him to Tyler. My son stood frozen at the altar, face pale. Vanessa rested one hand lightly on his arm. She wasn't smiling anymore. "Say something," I thought. "Please, son." "Someone should sit this man down." Marcus continued louder now, playing to the crowd. "Before he ruins the whole ceremony." Murmurs went through the guests. I could feel the weight of their judgment settling over me. Tyler still said nothing. Marcus turned, slightly addressing the room. "I apologize for the disruption. Some people don't know how to behave in polite company." That's when Tyler finally spoke. Not to Marcus, to me. His voice was quiet, but it carried across those 300 witnesses. "Dad." I looked at him, waiting, hoping. "Maybe you should sit down." The words were soft, almost gentle, which somehow made them worse. "You're embarrassing me." The ballroom tilted. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The chandelier light went too bright and then too dim. Tyler Bennett, my son, my boy. The kid I'd raised alone after his mother's heart gave out had just chosen them over me. And then he laughed. Just a nervous chuckle, but it was enough. Marcus laughed too, a deep, satisfied sound. Vanessa's face relaxed into something that looked like victory. 300 people watched it happen. Not one of them stood up for me. Not one. I bent down, slowly picked up the ribbon I dropped, and placed it on the nearest chair. My hands were steady now. Funny how that happens when the worst thing you can imagine actually occurs. The shaking stops. You just go numb. I didn't look at Tyler, didn't look at Marcus or Vanessa or any of those 300 guests in their expensive clothes and careful makeup. I just turned and walked. My footsteps echoed on the marble floor, steady measured each one, taking me farther from the son I thought I knew. No one said a word. No one moved. The silence followed me like a shadow all the way to the back of the ballroom. When I reached the doors, I pushed through without looking back. Behind me, I heard the officiant's voice, awkward and uncertain. Shall we continue?" I kept walking down the empty hallway, past hotel staff who looked away quickly, past paintings of Charleston Gardens and old Southern estates. My reflection caught in a gold-framed mirror a 62-year-old man in a suit that didn't quite fit, looking exactly like what Marcus had called me. Hired help, blue collar, someone who didn't belong. I've lost him, I thought. The words echoed in my head with each footstep. I've lost my son. Marie's face flashed in my mind, her smile the way she used to say Tyler's name, like it was a prayer. She'd made me promise the night before she passed 6 years ago to always protect our boy. And I just walked away. But I didn't know then what I know now. I didn't know the wedding was only the beginning. I didn't know that within 24 hours I'd discover the real reason Marcus Caldwell wanted me silenced. I didn't know that Marcus wasn't just cruel, he was dangerous. That he'd been planning this for months, that my son wasn't the only one who'd betrayed me, that the humiliation I just endured was the least of what was coming. All I knew standing in that empty hotel hallway with the muffled sounds of my son's wedding filtering through closed doors was that I'd lost the only thing I had left in this world, and I had absolutely no idea how to get him back. 6 years ago, my wife Marie passed away from heart failure at 59, and I thought I'd lost everything. I was wrong. I hadn't lost my son yet. March 2018. Marie and I had been married 27 years since 1991, when I was 29 and she was 32. We'd built a good life in Charlotte, nothing fancy but solid. A 3-bedroom house with a paid-off mortgage, a son who'd grown up strong and kind, and enough love to fill every empty corner. Then one Tuesday morning, Marie's heart stopped. No warning. She was putting on her coat for work when she collapsed. I called 911, tried everything I knew, but she was already gone. Tyler came home that same day. He was 24, working his first real job as a project manager. He took 3 months off to help me stand on my own feet again. He slept on the couch, cooked meals I barely touched, and sat with me when the silence got too heavy. The life insurance paid out $425,000. After taxes, I cleared $390,000, more money than I'd ever seen. Marie had insisted on that. Policy years ago said she wanted Tyler and me taken care of if something happened. I'd argued we couldn't afford it. She'd signed the papers anyway. She was always smarter than me. I used some for the funeral, put the rest in savings for Tyler's future. Marie would have wanted that, wanted our son to have opportunities we never had. The house felt wrong after she passed, too quiet, too full of her absence. But I kept one thing close. On our 20th wedding anniversary in 2011, Marie gave me a silver pocket watch, real silver with my initials on the back and an inscription inside, "To Thomas, 20 years of love, Marie 2011. I'd told her it was too much, that we couldn't afford something like that. She just smiled and said some things were worth the cost. I wore it every Sunday to church for a year, then retired it to a shelf in my study beside our wedding photo. That watch sat there for 13 years, a reminder that Marie had been real, that our life together wasn't something I'd imagined. Marie loved white lilies. Every anniversary I'd bring her a bouquet from the corner florist, nothing fancy, just a dozen stems wrapped in brown paper. She'd put them in a blue vase on the kitchen table, and their scent would fill the whole house for a week. After she passed, I kept the tradition. Once a year on our anniversary, I'd take lilies to her grave and leave them there. For a few minutes, it felt like she was close enough to hear me. The watch and the lilies, those were my anchors. Tyler started dating again about a year after his mother passed. I was glad. He was young and deserved to move forward even if I couldn't. He brought a few girls around for dinner over the years. Nice enough, but nothing serious. Then in May 2022, he called with that particular tone, hope mixed with terror. "Dad," he said, "I met someone. Her name's Vanessa. I think this might be it." I was happy for him. Scared maybe the way any parent gets when their child starts building a life that doesn't include them at the center, but mostly happy. He brought her to dinner in June, Vanessa Caldwell, 25 years old, beautiful in a way that made me think of department store mannequins, perfect but cold. She smiled when Tyler introduced us, called me Mr. Bennett, even after I said Thomas was fine and complimented the house in that tone people use when they're being polite about something beneath them. Her parents came too, Marcus and Helen Caldwell. Marcus was my age, early 60s, with the build that comes from gym memberships, not physical work. Expensive watch, expensive shoes, cologne that probably cost more than my grocery budget. He shook my hand like he was doing me a favor. "Thomas," he said, and I heard the assessment in his voice. "Tyler tells me you're a mechanic." "Well, retired," I said. 40 years at the same garage. "Well," his smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's honest work." I knew exactly what he meant. Not good work, not respectable work, just honest, the kind poor people do because they don't have better options. Helen Caldwell barely spoke, 57 thin in an anxious way, eyes down when Marcus talked. She excused herself twice to check her phone. I got the sense she was used to being small, to taking up as little space as possible. And Vanessa, she was pleasant, sweet even, laughed at Tyler's jokes, touched his arm when he talked. But I noticed the small things. How she glanced at my furniture like she was calculating yard sale values. How she mentioned Tyler's potential 3 times in one evening. How she smiled at Marcus when he cracked jokes about blue-collar work, like they shared something private, and Tyler and I were just the punchline. My gut twisted. Something was wrong. I couldn't point to anything concrete, but the feeling was there, a cold weight saying this woman is not who she pretends to be. I should have said something. Should have pulled Tyler aside and asked if he was sure. But I didn't. He was happy, and I wasn't going to be the sad old man who took that from him too. They got engaged in September 2023. Tyler called at 6 in the morning, barely able to get the words out. "She said, 'Yes, Dad, we're getting married.' I told him I was happy for him. I think I meant it." The wedding was set for September 7th, 2024, almost a year of watching Tyler get pulled deeper into the Caldwell orbit, of biting my tongue every time Marcus made comments about helping Tyler reach his full potential or setting him up properly. Like Tyler hadn't been doing fine before Vanessa. Like I hadn't raised him to stand on his own. I bought a new suit for the wedding. Nothing fancy, charcoal gray from a department store, but I had it pressed and hemmed. I wore a tie Marie had bought me years ago. I wanted to look respectable. Wanted Tyler to introduce me without that flicker of embarrassment I'd started seeing when Marcus was around. I wanted to believe I was wrong about Vanessa, about Marcus, about all of it. The morning of September 7th, I woke at 4:30. Too early, but sleep wouldn't come. The house was too quiet the way it always was before something bad happened. I lay there thinking about Marie, about Tyler, about the distance I'd seen growing in my son's eyes. I should have trusted my instincts. Should have said something, done something, grabbed Tyler, and made him see what I saw. Maybe I could have saved him, saved both of us. But I chose silence. I chose to hope I was wrong, to believe love would keep my son tethered to the man I'd raised him to be. And silence, I would learn, can be the deadliest choice of all. I didn't know Marcus's full story at the time, but over the months leading up to the wedding, I pieced together fragments, overheard conversations. Tyler's offhand comments, things Helen let slip when Marcus wasn't listening. If I'd known the whole truth, maybe I would have broken my silence sooner. Maybe I could have saved Tyler from what was coming, but I didn't know. I only suspected. And suspicion, I'd learn, is a weapon that's useless if you don't pull the trigger. From the moment I met Marcus Caldwell in June 2022, something felt off. He had that particular Polish wealthy men get when they're trying too hard. The expensive watch that caught light at just the right angle. The tailored suits that probably cost what I used to make in a month. The cologne so heavy you could taste it from across the room. He talked about development projects and investment portfolios. In the vague way people do when they want you to think they're important without actually telling you anything concrete. I'd spent 40 years as a mechanic. You learn to read machines, sure, but you also learn to read the people who bring them in. The ones who act like everything's fine when their transmission's about to fall out. The ones who smile and nod while their bank account's bleeding dry. Marcus had that same energy, the desperate cheerfulness of a man pretending he's not drowning. When a car leaks oil, you can smell it before you see it. Marcus Caldwell leaked desperation the same way. The car he drove was a leased BMW. I could tell by the dealer plates and the way he parked it at an angle so you'd notice. The watch was real enough, but I caught him checking his phone every 10 minutes like he was waiting for bad news. And Helen, his wife, looked like she hadn't slept well in years. At that first dinner, she excused herself twice to take phone calls, came back with her hands shaking, and Marcus waved it off with a joke about vendors who don't know when to quit calling. Tyler didn't see it, or maybe he did and chose not to. When I asked him what Marcus did for a living, Tyler said something about real estate development and multiple properties in the Carolinas, with the kind of confidence that only comes from not asking too many questions. I should have asked more questions. Over the next 2 years, from that first dinner through Tyler's proposal and into the wedding planning, I watched Marcus operate. He was always talking about the next big project, the investment that was about to pay off, the development deal that would set everyone up for life. But the details were always fuzzy. The timeline kept shifting, and Helen got thinner and more nervous with every family gathering. Once at a Sunday dinner Tyler hosted at his apartment, I overheard Marcus on the phone in the hallway. "I need another 60 days. He was saying, his voice low and tight. "The funds are coming, I just need more time." When he came back, he was all smiles again, slapping Tyler on the back and talking about taking him to some country club for a round of golf. That's when I knew for certain. Marcus wasn't just stretching the truth. He was running from something, but I didn't know what. Not until months later after the wedding collapsed, and Helen showed up at my door with 5 years' worth of evidence in a banker's box. That's when I learned the real story. Marcus Caldwell had been a legitimate real estate developer once. Back in 2015, he'd started acquiring properties around Charlotte residential lots he planned to develop into upscale housing. He'd talked investors into putting up money, taken out loans against future profits, and hired contractors to break ground on 3 separate subdivisions. Then the market shifted. Interest rates went up. Buyers got scarce. And Marcus, who'd leveraged everything on the assumption that he could flip those properties fast, found himself holding millions of dollars in debt with nothing to show for it. The projects collapsed between 2016 and 2018. 3 subdivisions partially built and abandoned. Contractors walked off when the checks stopped coming. Investors filed lawsuits. Banks started foreclosure proceedings. And Marcus went from legitimate developer to desperate con man in the span of 2 years. Helen showed me the numbers, later printed on spreadsheets she'd been keeping in secret. The debts were staggering. $1.2 million to private investors, people who'd trusted Marcus with their retirement savings, their kids' college funds, their life's work. $650,000 to the bank, secured against properties that were now worthless. $380,000 to contractors who'd done the work and never got paid. $170,000 in private loans from people Marcus had convinced to bridge the gap until the development paid off. $85,000 on credit cards and personal loans, interest compounding monthly. Total $2.5 million in debt, give or take. Tyler had mentioned it once months before the wedding, in that casual way kids talk about their in-laws' problems. "Marcus is restructuring," he'd said over the phone, like it was no big deal. That's normal in development. You take losses on one project and make it back on the next. I'd thought about that word, restructuring, the corporate euphemism for drowning. That's what desperate men call it when the water's closing over their heads and they're still pretending they can swim. But I didn't push. I didn't ask Tyler if he was sure if he'd seen the books, if he knew what restructuring actually meant in Marcus's case. I kept my mouth shut and told myself it wasn't my business. I learned about the victims later too. After the police got involved after the evidence came out, I met some of them. Mr. Albert Kowalski, 73 years old, who'd invested $85,000, his entire life savings, into one of Marcus's developments. He'd believed Marcus when he said the return would triple in 3 years. Instead, he got a lawsuit and a lien on his house. Mrs. Diane Morrison, a widow trying to stretch her late husband's pension, who'd put $120,000 into what Marcus called a sure thing. She was facing the possibility of losing her home when the civil suits started. A young couple I never learned their names who'd sunk their down payment money, $120,000, into Marcus's promises. They ended up in a rental apartment with a newborn and no savings. 15 construction workers who'd done months of labor and never saw a paycheck. Men who'd shown up every day, poured foundations, framed houses, hung drywall, and got nothing but excuses when payday came around. Marcus had destroyed these people. Not quickly, not violently, but slowly, with handshakes and contracts and promises he never intended to keep. And when the money ran out and the lawsuits started piling up, Marcus had gone looking for a new source of income. A target. Someone with assets he could access, someone trusting enough to manipulate someone, isolated enough that no one would ask too many questions. He'd found Tyler, and through Tyler, he'd found me. My house worth $485,000 paid off with a clear title. My life insurance payout $390,000 sitting in a bank account collecting dust because I had no idea what else to do with it. Add it up, and you get $875,000 in accessible assets. Not enough to cover all of Marcus's debts, but enough to buy him time. Enough to keep the wolves at bay a little longer. To Marcus Caldwell, I wasn't Tyler's father. I wasn't a person with a history, with grief, with a right to exist in my own son's life. I was an asset, a mark, a solution to a problem I didn't even know existed. And he'd been planning to take everything from me since the day Tyler first brought Vanessa home. But Marcus wasn't just hiding failed business deals and desperate debt. He was hiding something bigger, something that would crack open his carefully constructed life and reveal the rot underneath. He was hiding an entire other existence, a secret family, a double life. And when that secret finally came to light, it would shatter everything, not just for Marcus, but for everyone caught in his orbit. For 2 years, I thought Helen Caldwell was just a quiet, nervous woman married to a loudmouth. I was wrong. Helen was a survivor, and she'd been planning her revenge for 15 years. I just didn't see it until the night she knocked on my door with a banker's box full of evidence and a confession that changed everything. From the first dinner in June 2022, Helen struck me as fragile. 57 years old, thin in the way that speaks of stress rather than health, with shoulders that curved inward like she was trying to take up less space in the world. She barely spoke during that first meal. When Marcus talked, which was constantly, she nodded at the right moments, smiled when she was supposed to, but her eyes never quite focused on anything. Over the next 2 years, through family dinners and wedding planning meetings, I watched her. Really watched her the way you watch a wounded animal. You're not sure how to help. She flinched when Marcus raised his voice, even if he wasn't angry. She checked her phone compulsively, hands trembling slightly as she scrolled through what I assume were messages. She wore long sleeves even in the middle of summer dark colors, high necklines, clothes that covered as much skin as possible. I suspected. Of course I did. 40 years of living teaches you to recognize certain patterns. But I never asked. It wasn't my place, I told myself. She was Tyler's future mother-in-law, not my friend. And what would I have said anyway? Are you okay? Does he hurt you? Those aren't questions you can just throw out over dinner rolls and small talk. At the rehearsal dinner, 2 nights before the wedding, I saw something shift in her face. She was sitting across from Marcus, watching him tell some story about a golf game, and her expression went completely flat. Not sad, not afraid, just empty. Like she'd burned through all her emotions years ago, and had nothing left but the performance. I recognized that look. I'd seen it in women at church, at the grocery store, in the waiting room at the garage when they'd bring in cars with dents they claimed came from parking garages. It was the look of someone who'd learned that being small and quiet was the only way to survive. Helen Caldwell was trapped. I knew it, but I didn't know the half of it. She told me the full story weeks later in my kitchen at midnight, after everything had collapsed. After the wedding that never finished, after the police came, after the evidence started spilling out like water from a cracked dam. She sat at my table with a cup of coffee she didn't drink and told me things she'd carried alone for 15 years. This is what I learned. In 2009, Helen's father, Frank Mitchell, was 72 years old and owned a small house in a quiet neighborhood outside Charlotte. Nothing fancy, but it was his, paid off, free and clear. He'd worked as a factory supervisor for 30 years, saved every penny he could, and that house was supposed to be his legacy. Something to leave Helen and her younger brother when he passed. Then Marcus came into Helen's life. They'd been married 3 years by then, and Marcus was still building his reputation as a developer. He was charming in those days, Helen said. Confident. He talked about investments and opportunities, about how smart money worked, and how old money stayed old by making the right moves. Frank had suffered a stroke the year before. Not severe enough to completely incapacitate him, but enough to slow his thinking to make him vulnerable to persuasion. Marcus saw the opening. He convinced Frank to transfer the house into a joint investment trust, explained it would protect the property from taxes from probate, from all the complications that come with aging. Helen's mother, Barbara, was 70 and scared of losing everything. They both signed the papers Marcus put in front of them. Within 6 months, the house was gone. sold to cover what Marcus claimed were necessary restructuring costs in one of his developments. Frank and Barbara Mitchell were evicted from the home they had lived in for 32 years. They moved into a small apartment. Barbara stopped sleeping. Frank's health declined, rapidly stressed, the doctor said, combined with the lingering effects of the stroke. He'd sit in that apartment, staring at the walls, asking Helen over and over how it had happened, how they'd lost everything. In 2011, Barbara passed away. Heart failure, the death certificate said, but Helen knew better. Her mother had been destroyed from the inside-out grief and stress and the unbearable shame of losing the one thing she'd thought was safe. Frank lasted until 2015, 4 years of declining health, of confusion, of anger that had nowhere to go. When he finally passed, Helen said it felt almost like mercy. She'd discovered the truth too late. By the time she understood what Marcus had actually done, the legal loopholes he'd exploited, the forged signatures, the way he'd manipulated her parents when they were at their most vulnerable, there was no way to undo it. The house was sold. The money was gone. Her parents were gone. And Helen carried the guilt like a stone in her chest. I brought him into their lives. She told me that night, her voice barely above a whisper. I married him. I introduced him to my father. I stood there and smiled while he destroyed them. She believed she'd taken her parents' lives as surely as if she'd done it with her own hands. That's the weight she'd carried for years, the knowledge that her choice, her marriage, had led directly to their suffering. But somewhere in that grief, something harder formed, something that wouldn't break. In 2019, 4 years after her father's death, Helen started gathering evidence, quietly, carefully. She hired a private investigator to track Marcus's financial dealings. She installed recording software on her phone and started documenting his conversations. She kept copies of every email, every bank statement, every suspicious document that crossed her desk. Over 5 years, she built a case. 127 emails proving fraud, 43 recordings of Marcus discussing schemes with his lawyer, with investors, with Vanessa. Financial statements showing the trail of money from victims' accounts into Marcus's pockets. Forged documents with signatures that didn't match. She kept everything in a safety deposit box at a bank Marcus didn't know about. She contacted other victims, quietly built a network of people who'd been destroyed by her husband's greed. She hired a lawyer in secret and started mapping out how to bring Marcus down. In 2021, she discovered the second family. The woman in Atlanta, the son Marcus had never mentioned the apartment he'd been paying for, with money that should have gone to the people he owed. That's when Helen knew. Marcus wasn't just a con man. He was a man with nothing to lose, living on borrowed time, desperate enough to do anything to keep his lies from catching up with him. And that made him dangerous. She should have warned me then. Should have told Tyler, told someone that Marcus Caldwell was a ticking time bomb. But she was scared, terrified that if she moved too soon, if she tipped her hand before she had every piece in place, Marcus would find a way to wriggle free. He always had before. So she waited, and watched, and gathered her evidence. And when the moment finally came, when everything exploded at Tyler's wedding, Helen was ready. I wish I'd known. I wish I'd seen the warrior hiding behind those frightened eyes. I wish I'd understood that the quiet woman who barely spoke at dinner was actually the strongest person in the room, carrying 15 years of grief and rage and preparation. Maybe together we could have protected Tyler sooner. Maybe we could have stopped what was coming. But Helen wasn't Marcus's only hidden truth. There was another family. Another life he'd been leading in parallel to the one we all saw. And when that truth finally surfaced, I understood just how far a desperate man would go to protect his secrets. I didn't know Marcus had a second family until Helen told me. Even now it seems impossible, like something from a TV show. But it was real. Diana Porter was real. Lucas was real. And Marcus had been living 2 lives for over a decade. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. Marcus was always on his phone. Always stepping away to take business calls at odd hours, 8 at night, Sunday mornings during family dinners. He'd excuse himself, walk to his car or another room, and come back 10 minutes later with that tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tyler explained it away. Marcus has investors all over, different time zones. That's just how development works, Dad. Maybe. But I'd spent 40 years watching people lie, and Marcus had that particular energy, constant checking, nervous glances at texts, tensing when messages came through. Once, about 6 months before the wedding, I saw him at a gas station 40 miles outside Charlotte. I'd been visiting a friend stopped for gas, and there was Marcus in casual clothes, strange since he usually dressed for board meetings. I waved. His face went blank for a second, not surprised blank like he was calculating. Then the smile returned. Thomas, what brings you out here? Visiting a friend? Client meeting up in Hickory. He gestured north vaguely. I nodded, but Hickory was another 40 miles past us and his tank was nearly full. He'd driven from somewhere south and was heading back toward Charlotte. I didn't say anything, just added it to the growing list of things about Marcus that didn't line up. Helen found out by accident in 2021. She told me this later after everything collapsed. She'd been doing laundry when she found a hotel receipt in Marcus's coat pocket. The Grand Marquis Hotel, Atlanta, 3-night stay. At first she thought it was just business travel, but when she checked credit card statements going back 6 months, she found the same hotel. Every other weekend, sometimes weekly, always Atlanta. That's when she hired the private investigator. The PI followed Marcus for 3 weeks, took photos, documented addresses. The photos showed everything. Marcus with a woman, mid-30s dark hair, pretty in a girl-next-door way. They'd go to restaurants to parks to a modest apartment complex south of Atlanta. In some photos, there was a boy maybe 11 or 12 walking between them. They looked like a family, because they were. The woman's name was Diana Porter, 38 years old in 2024, which meant she was 26 when Marcus met her in 2012. She worked as an office manager at a medical clinic. She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment Marcus had been paying for since 2013. The boy was Lucas, Marcus's son. Born in 2013, which meant Marcus had been maintaining this parallel existence for over a decade. Marcus met Diana in 2012. He was 50 still, riding high on development deals that hadn't yet collapsed with enough money to impress a young woman who didn't ask too many questions about where he went. He told Diana he was a traveling businessman, that he had properties all over the Southeast requiring his attention. That work kept him on the road, but he'd always come back to her. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? He paid for everything, the apartment, groceries, the expenses of raising a child. He showed up every other weekend, played father to Lucas, and Diana never suspected there was a wife and daughter in Charlotte living their own version of the same lie. Helen showed me the financials later. She'd documented everything. Monthly rent, $2,800. Marcus had upgraded Diana twice over the years, each time to a nicer place. Child support, unofficial, mostly cash. But Diana's bank records showed regular deposits $1,200 monthly. Miscellaneous expenses, groceries, school supplies, birthday presents, camps, another $500 a month on average. Total $4,500 a month, $54,000 a year, for over a decade. Helen confronted him privately, laid the photos on the kitchen table one night, and asked him to explain. Marcus didn't deny it, just looked at her with cold eyes and said, "You say one word about this to anyone, and I will destroy you. Do you understand?" Helen understood. She'd already lost her parents to Marcus's schemes, so she stayed quiet, kept gathering evidence, and waited. When Helen told me all this, I sat at my kitchen table doing the math. The numbers were devastating. Marcus's monthly burden wasn't just debt payments. It was 2 complete households. Debt payments roughly $8,000 a month minimum. Charlotte household mortgage utilities. Helen's expenses, Vanessa's wedding, costs another $5,000. Atlanta household $4,500. Total $17,500 a month. $210,000 a year. Marcus's actual income, Helen showed me, tax returns. Some years barely $40,000. Most years he showed losses. He was drowning. The only way he'd stayed afloat was by conning new investors, taking new loans, robbing Peter to pay Paul, while the whole house of cards teetered on collapse. No wonder he wanted my house, my life insurance money. $875,000 in accessible assets wasn't enough to solve all his problems, but it would buy him time. Maybe a year, maybe 2. Long enough to find another mark, another scheme, another way to keep the lies from catching up. To Marcus, I wasn't Tyler's father. I wasn't a person with a history with grief, with a right to exist in my son's life. I was an asset, a solution to a problem I didn't know existed. And he'd been planning to take everything since the day Tyler first brought Vanessa home. Marcus Caldwell wasn't just greedy. He was cornered, trapped by his own web of deception with no way out that didn't involve taking from someone else. And cornered men, desperate men with nothing left to lose, are the most dangerous kind. But even knowing all this, even understanding Marcus's desperation, I couldn't have predicted how far he'd go. Or the way he'd use my own son as a weapon against me, turning Tyler into an accomplice without Tyler even realizing it. 3 days before the wedding, I'd hear a conversation that should have made me run. Instead, I told myself I was paranoid. That was my mistake. Because Marcus wasn't just planning to take my house. He was planning to erase me completely. And my son, my boy, the one person I thought would always stand beside me, was already so deep in Marcus's orbit that he couldn't see which way was up anymore. 3 days before the wedding, I overheard a conversation I should have run from, but I stayed, and that single choice would unravel everything. Tuesday night, September 3rd. I drove to Tyler's apartment on the north side of Charlotte with a Tupperware container of oatmeal raisin cookies cooling on the passenger seat. Marie used to bake them every Sunday afternoon, filling our little kitchen with the smell of cinnamon and brown sugar. I had picked up the habit after she died, a small thread connecting me to her, a ritual that made the silence at home a little less heavy. Tyler worked late most nights, and I thought he might like a surprise when he got home. I knocked twice on the door of Unit 2C. No answer. I tried his phone. It rang through to voicemail. I hesitated, then pulled out the spare key he had given me years ago, back when he still wanted me around for things like leaky faucets and stuck windows. I unlocked the door, quietly slipped inside, and set the cookies on the kitchen counter beside a stack of unopened mail. That was when I heard the voices. They came from the bedroom, muffled but distinct. A man's low rumble and a woman's higher pitch. I froze. Tyler was supposed to be at the office until 9. I glanced toward the door, debating whether to announce myself or slip back out. Before I could decide, I heard my name. Thomas isn't going to be a problem. Marcus Caldwell's voice. Cold certain, like he was discussing the weather. I stopped breathing. I should have left. I should have walked out, closed the door behind me, and driven home. But I didn't. I stepped back into the narrow hallway that led to the bedroom, pressed myself against the wall, and listened. "Are you sure?" Vanessa's voice. She sounded nervous, younger than her 27 years. "He's been asking Tyler a lot of questions lately. He's a mechanic." Marcus said the word like it tasted sour, like it was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "He doesn't understand legal paperwork. By the time he figures anything out, the house will already be in Tyler's name. And once it's transferred, I'll handle the rest." What if Tyler starts asking questions? Tyler won't ask? Marcus's tone sharpened, turned clinical. "Not until it's too late. He trusts his father. He thinks Thomas is some kind of saint. That's the weakness we're using." I felt my stomach twist. The hallway walls seemed to close in the air, thick and stale. I wanted to move, to shout, to kick that bedroom door open and drag Marcus out by his collar, but my legs wouldn't obey. "What about after?" Vanessa asked. "When Thomas realizes what happened?" "By then," Marcus said slowly, carefully, like he was explaining something to a child, "Thomas will be in a memory care facility. A nice one. Quiet. Far enough from Charlotte that Tyler won't visit often. We'll tell him it's for Thomas's own safety, that he's getting confused, forgetful, maybe even a little aggressive. Tyler will believe it because he'll want to believe it, and Thomas won't be able to do a damn thing about it." The air left my lungs. I pressed harder against the wall, afraid they might hear my heart pounding through the drywall. "Hey, Dad, that's..." Vanessa hesitated. "That's really cold. It's necessary." Marcus's voice turned flat, businesslike, the voice of a man who had made his peace with what he was about to do. "I'm $2 million in the hole, Vanessa. The creditors are circling. I've got 15 contractors threatening lawsuits and a mortgage I can't cover. Your mother knows about Diana and Lucas. Everything is falling apart. Thomas has $485,000 sitting in that house free and clear, and another $390,000 in life insurance money he's never touched. That's $875,000. He paused. I heard the creak of bed springs, like he had stood up and started pacing. "Do you understand?" Marcus continued. "That money is the only way I survive this. Tyler marries you. We get Tyler to convince Thomas to sign a transfer of property agreement, for estate planning purposes, we'll say, protecting Tyler's inheritance. Tyler won't question it. He thinks he's doing the right thing. Once the house is in Tyler's name, I'll leverage it, borrow against it, liquidate the insurance if I have to. And if Thomas starts making noise, we move him into a care facility and make him someone else's problem." "What if he fights back?" Vanessa asked. "He won't." Marcus's certainty was chilling absolute. "Thomas Bennett is a 62-year-old widower with no other family, no lawyer, and no idea how to navigate the system. He'll be confused, angry, but he'll be alone, and alone people don't win." Silence fell. I stood in that dim hallway, heart-hammering mind, racing through 40 years of memory in the space of 10 seconds. Marie and I had worked 40 years for that house. Every mortgage payment, every sacrifice. Every weekend I spent fixing the roof or repainting the siding instead of taking her to the mountains like she wanted. We raised Tyler in that house. I taught him to ride a bike in the driveway. Marie nursed him through chickenpox in the upstairs bedroom. I remember Tyler at 8 years old, standing on a stepladder helping me paint the backyard fence white. He got more paint on himself than the wood, and Marie laughed so hard she cried. That house was the only thing I had left of her, of us, of the life we built together. And Marcus wanted to take it, not with a gun or a crowbar, with paperwork, with Tyler's signature, with my son's trust turned into a weapon. I had a choice in that moment. I could walk into that bedroom, confront them both, and blow the whole scheme apart. I could call the police. I could call Tyler right now, tell him everything, beg him to cancel the wedding, and run as far from the Caldwells as possible. But I didn't, because if I confronted Marcus now, it would be my word against his. A bitter old mechanic accusing a wealthy developer. Tyler would side with Vanessa. He would think I was jealous, paranoid, trying to ruin his happiness because I couldn't let go. I would lose my son before I ever lost my house. So instead, I backed away slowly, silently, like a man retreating from a sleeping bear. I left the cookies on the counter. I slipped out the door, locked it behind me, and walked down 2 flights of stairs to the parking lot. I sat in my truck for 5 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Then I drove home through the dark streets of Charlotte. The radio played a Johnny Cash song I didn't hear. The traffic lights blurred red and green. I pulled into my driveway, cut the engine, and sat in the silence. Inside, I turned on the lamp beside Marie's photograph. I picked up the silver pocket watch from the shelf, the one she gave me 20 years ago, the one with the inscription, "To Thomas, 20 years of love, Marie 2011. I held it in my palm, felt its weight, and thought about all the hours I'd worked to give her a good life. All the hours I'd thought mattered. I told myself I needed time. I needed to think. I needed proof. Something concrete, something Tyler couldn't deny or explain away. If I moved too fast, I would lose everything. If I stayed calm, stayed quiet, I could outmaneuver Marcus. I could protect my son and my home. I convinced myself that silence was strategy. I was wrong. In 48 hours, I would stand at Tyler's wedding rehearsal and watch Vanessa steal my house key from my coat pocket. In 72 hours, I would discover my home, broken into, my most important documents stolen, and I still wouldn't call the police. I would stand in front of 300 wedding guests and say nothing while Marcus humiliated me. I would watch my son choose his wife's family over his own father, and I would walk away in silence. I should have acted immediately. I should have called the police. Woke and Tyler confronted Marcus right there in that apartment. But my silence, that damned careful silence, would cost me everything. And by the time I finally found my voice, it would already be too late. The rehearsal dinner was on Thursday night, 48 hours before the wedding. I walked in determined to find proof. I walked out with something far worse. I arrived at Piedmont Bistro on West Trade Street just after 6 o'clock. The restaurant was one of those places with cloth napkins folded into swans and waiters in black vests who refilled your water glass before you even noticed it was half empty. Marcus had reserved the private dining room at the back. 50 guests, round tables draped in white linen candles, flickering in glass votives. The whole scene looked like a page torn from a wedding magazine. Clean, perfect, expensive. I didn't belong there. I knew it, Marcus knew it, and he wanted everyone else to know it too. Tyler met me at the door, grinning, his tie already loosened. He pulled me into a quick hug, clapped me on the back, and said, "Dad, thanks for coming early. Vanessa's been stressed all week. Tonight's supposed to be fun, okay? No drama." I forced a smile. No drama. But I was lying. I had spent the past 48 hours replaying that overheard conversation in my head. The house, the insurance, the memory care facility. I didn't have proof yet. No recording, no document, nothing I could show Tyler that wouldn't sound like the paranoid ramblings of a jealous father. So I decided I would watch. I would listen. I would catch Marcus in a slip, a look, a word that would crack his polished veneer wide open. I sat at the family table near the front of the room. Tyler on my right, Vanessa on his other side, her hand resting on his arm like she owned him. Marcus and Helen sat across from me. Helen looked pale, her eyes fixed on her folded hands. Marcus looked like a man who had just closed a profitable deal. Halfway through the first course, some kind of soup with a French name I couldn't pronounce, Marcus stood and raised his glass. The room quieted. He smiled the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. To my daughter, he began, his voice smooth practiced. Vanessa, you've always made me proud. And Tyler, welcome to the family. I know you two are going to build a wonderful life together. A stable life. A secure life. He paused, his gaze drifting toward me. Hey, here's to new beginnings. Marcus continued, lifting his glass higher. And to new opportunities. The word hung in the air like a hook. A few people chuckled politely, clinking glasses. Tyler beamed, oblivious. Vanessa smiled, her fingers tightening on Tyler's arm. Marcus met my eyes across the table, and for just a second I saw it, the glint of a predator measuring its prey. I forced myself to lift my glass. I forced myself to drink. I kept my coat draped over the back of my chair. My keys, house truck garage, were clipped to a ring in the right pocket. I checked them twice during the meal, a nervous habit I'd picked up since Tuesday night. Both times they were there. It was just after 7:30 when Vanessa stood to refill her wine glass from the bottle on the table. She leaned across Tyler, her hand brushing the edge of my chair. And then, so fast I almost missed it, her elbow knocked the bottle. Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth, splashing toward my lap. I jumped up, instinct taking over. The chair scraped backward. My coat slid halfway off the seat. "Oh my God!" Vanessa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "I'm so clumsy. I'm so sorry." She grabbed a fistful of napkins and started dabbing at the table, the chair, my coat. Her movements were frantic, apologetic, her voice high and breathless. "Let me help." "Oh no, did it get on your coat? Here, let me—" "It's fine," I said, trying to wave her off. But she was already pulling my coat toward her, brushing at a non-existent stain on the sleeve. Marcus laughed. Loud, booming, deliberate. "Vanessa, sweetheart, you're a disaster tonight. Poor Thomas first. You drown him, then you assault his jacket. The table erupted in laughter. Someone made a joke about wedding jitters. Tyler grinned, shaking his head. "Babe, maybe switch to water for a bit." Vanessa giggled, flush still holding my coat. "I'm the worst. I'm so sorry, Thomas." I took the coat back, draped it over my chair again, and sat down. The whole thing had taken maybe 2 minutes. The conversation moved on. I forgot about it. 10 minutes later, I reached into my coat pocket to check my phone. My fingers brushed the key ring. I pulled it out. The truck key was there. The garage key was there. The house key was gone. I stared at the ring, my heart starting to pound. I checked the other pocket. Nothing. I checked the floor under my chair, under the table. Nothing. I looked up. Vanessa was at the far end of the room, laughing with the bridesmaids, a glass of white wine in her hand. Marcus was talking to Tyler, one hand on my son's shoulder, his expression warm, fatherly. Helen was staring at her plate. I stood my chair, scraping loudly. A few heads turned. I walked over to Vanessa, keeping my voice low. "Vanessa," I said, "did you see my house key? It was on my key ring. It's gone." She blinked, her smile faltering. "Your house key." "No, I didn't see it." "Are you sure it was there?" "I'm sure." She glanced at the bridesmaids, then back at me. "Maybe it fell off. Those old key rings can break sometimes." It didn't fall off. Marcus appeared beside us, his hand landing on my shoulder like a weight. "Thomas, what's wrong?" "I'm missing my house key." Marcus raised his eyebrows, his expression shifting to concern. "Your house key? That's odd. Did you check your pockets? Your car?" I checked. He glanced at Vanessa, then back at me. "Well, you know how it is, Thomas. Things slip our minds as we get older. I lose my keys twice a week." He laughed, patting my shoulder. "It's probably sitting on your kitchen counter right now." "It's not." Tyler walked over, his smile fading. "Dad, what's going on?" "Wanzi's waninderfrisi. I had my house key when I got here," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Now it's gone." Tyler sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Dad, come on. Don't make a scene. It's probably in your truck." "It's Tyler, I'm telling you." "Dad, please." His voice dropped hard and quiet. "Not tonight." I looked at my son, at Vanessa, her eyes wide and innocent, at Marcus, his mouth twitching at the corner, barely suppressing a smirk. I turned and walked out. The parking lot was dark, the air thick with the smell of asphalt and exhaust. I unlocked my truck and tore through the cab, glove box under the seats between the cushions. Nothing. I stood there in the empty lot, my hands shaking, my breath coming fast. She took it. I knew she took it, and I knew exactly why. For the house. I thought about calling a locksmith first thing in the morning, but it was Thursday night. The wedding was Saturday. I had 36 hours. Could I get the locks changed in time? Should I tell Tyler? Would he even believe me? I drove home in silence, my mind racing. I told myself I still had time. I told myself I could handle this. I didn't know that giving them 2 days was all they needed. By Saturday morning at 9:30, my house had been broken into, my most important documents taken, and a note left behind that would chill me for months. Saturday morning, I woke at 4:30 with a tightness in my chest I couldn't name. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. I hadn't slept more than an hour. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus's smirk across the rehearsal dinner table. I saw Vanessa's wide, innocent eyes. I saw my son's hand on her arm, protective, trusting, blind. I got up, pulled on my robe, and went downstairs. By 5:15, I had coffee brewing and the oven preheating to 350 degrees. I mixed flour, butter, sugar, and fresh blueberries. Marie's recipe, the one she used to make every Saturday mornings when Tyler was a kid. The dough was sticky and soft under my hands. I shaped it into rounds, brushed the tops with cream, and slid the tray into the oven. The smell filled the kitchen. Warm, sweet, familiar. For a moment, I almost felt like she was still here. I sat at the table with my coffee and looked at the framed photograph on the counter. Marie, 30 years old, laughing in the backyard with Tyler on her hip. I picked it up, held it in both hands. "Today's the day, Marie," I said quietly. "Tyler's getting married. I wish you were here." I set the photo down, rubbed my eyes, and tried to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, I'd been wrong. Maybe Vanessa wasn't part of Marcus's plan. Maybe she loved Tyler. Maybe the missing house key was a coincidence. Maybe I was just a paranoid old man who couldn't let go. By 7 o'clock, I was sitting at the table with a scone and a second cup of coffee, trying to hold on to that fragile hope. At 9:30, it shattered. I went into my home office to get my tie clip from the desk drawer. The room was at the back of the house, a small square space with a window overlooking the yard. I reached for the drawer handle and stopped. The window was broken. Glass littered the hardwood floor, glittering in the morning sunlight. The curtain hung half off its rod, torn. The desk drawers were open papers, scattered across the surface and onto the floor. The filing cabinet stood ajar, folders pulled out and tossed aside. My legs went weak. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. The red folder was gone. I kept all my important documents in that folder. The house deed, the life insurance policy Marie and I had taken out 20 years ago, her will, Tyler's birth certificate. Everything that proved I owned my home. Everything that protected my son's inheritance. Gone. I turned to the shelf beside the desk. The silver pocket watch, the one Marie gave me in 2011, the one with the inscription, "To Thomas, 20 years of love," was gone too. The empty space where it had sat for 6 years stared back at me like a wound. And then I saw the note. It was on the desk, a single sheet of white paper, the words printed in block letters. "We know about the insurance money. We know about the house. Don't fight this. Don't call the police. If you want your son safe, you'll sign when we tell you to sign. This is only the beginning." My hands started to shake. I read it again and again. The words blurred. My knees buckled and I sank into the desk chair, the note trembling in my grip. "If you want your son safe." I forced myself to stand. I walked through the rest of the house, checking every room. The television was still there. My laptop sat on the kitchen counter untouched. Marie's jewelry box in the bedroom hadn't been opened. Nothing else was missing. Only the documents, only the watch, only the things that mattered. This wasn't a robbery. This was a message. I picked up my phone. My finger hovered over the 9. I could call the police. I could report the break-in, show them the note, tell them everything I'd overheard on Tuesday night. But then I thought about Marcus's voice in Tyler's apartment. By then, Thomas will be in a memory care facility. We'll tell him it's for his own safety. I thought about the note, "If you want your son safe." What if I called the police and Marcus retaliated? What if he hurt Tyler? What if he found a way to make me look unstable, delusional? A bitter old man fabricating stories to sabotage his son's wedding. What if calling for help was exactly what he wanted? Proof that I was paranoid, unfit, a danger to myself. I set the phone down. At 10 o'clock, I called Dorothy Klein. She was 71, a retired school teacher who lived 3 doors down. She and Marie had been close. Coffee every Tuesday morning, book club once a month. After Marie died, Dorothy checked on me every few days, brought me casseroles, sat with me when the house felt too quiet. "Dorothy," I said when she answered, "my house was broken into last night." There was a sharp intake of breath. "Thomas, oh my God. Are you hurt? Did you call the police?" "I'm fine. And no, I didn't." Why not? I told her about the note, about Tyler, about the fear that kept my finger frozen over the 9. Thomas, she said, her voice shaking. You have to call them. This is serious. They threatened you. The note mentioned Tyler. I can't risk it. Then at least cancel the wedding. Don't go. Stay home. Lock the doors. If I don't show up, Tyler will never forgive me. He'll think I'm trying to sabotage his happiness. I'll lose him either way. She was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, what are you going to do? I'm going to the wedding, I said. I'm going to act like everything's fine. And after it's over, I'll figure out what to do next. Thomas, I have to go, Dorothy. I'm sorry. I hung up before she could argue. I spent the next 2 hours sweeping up the broken glass, nailing a sheet of plywood over the window from the inside, and folding the note into my wallet. I didn't call a locksmith. I didn't call a contractor. I didn't tell anyone else. At 2 o'clock, I put on my charcoal suit, the one I'd bought for the wedding. I clipped the tie, using a cheap metal clip I found in a drawer since my good one was still somewhere in the mess, and checked myself in the mirror. I looked tired, old, beaten. I picked up Marie's photograph from the kitchen counter and held it one more time. I should have called the police, I whispered, but I was scared. I set it down, grabbed my keys, and drove to the Sterling Grand Hotel. I thought the break-in was the worst thing that would happen that day. I was wrong, because at 5:25 that afternoon, in front of 300 witnesses, my son would destroy me in a way no thief ever could. If you're still here, comment, "Still watching," so I know you're with me. And tell me if you were in my place, would you stay silent or start uncovering the truth no matter the cost? Because what comes next changes everything. Quick note, the next part includes some dramatized elements for storytelling. If that's not for you, feel free to stop here, but if you stay, you'll see why it matters. I didn't see Vanessa's messages to Brad Thornton until Tyler showed them to me the day after the wedding. But when I read them, when I saw the cold calculation behind her smile, I finally understood. Tyler came to my house on Sunday afternoon. His eyes were red, his hands shaking. He walked into the living room, sat down on the couch, and handed me his phone without a word. I want you to see the kind of person I almost married, Dad, he said, his voice cracking. I want you to see what I was too blind to notice. I took the phone. The screen showed a conversation between Vanessa and someone named Brad Thornton. The messages went back months, all the way to July when Tyler was picking out wedding invitations and asking me to help pay for the reception. These messages were sent while Tyler was planning his wedding, while I was baking scones in the early morning darkness and buying a new suit I couldn't really afford. I started reading. July 18th, 2024. Vanessa, I need to see you. Brad, I thought you were engaged to that construction guy. Vanessa, project manager, and it's complicated. Brad, you said we were done. Vanessa, you're commitment phobic, but you're also worth $8.5 million. Tyler's worth potential. Brad, so you're using him. Vanessa, I'm being practical. His father has a house and a life insurance payout. Once we're married, I'll have access. Then I can move on. Brad, that's cold. Vanessa, you like that about me? I stopped reading for a moment, staring at the words. Tyler's worth potential, not love, not a future. Potential, like he was a stock option she was waiting to cash in. I kept scrolling. August 10th, 2024. Vanessa, Tyler's dad is a problem. He doesn't trust me. Brad, smart old man. Vanessa, he's a mechanic, grease under his nails, cheap suit, simple, but stubborn. Brad, so what's the plan? Vanessa, Marcus is handling it. Forged power of attorney fake competency evaluations. By Christmas, Thomas Bennett will be in a care facility, and the house will be in a trust I control. Brad, what about Tyler? Vanessa, Tyler only sees what he wants to see. Love. A future. He doesn't see who I really am. Brad, you're ruthless. Vanessa, I'm ambitious. I felt something twist in my chest. Grease under his nails. Cheap suits. Simple. That was how she saw me. Not as Tyler's father. Not as the man who raised him alone after Marie died. Just an obstacle. A problem to be handled. And Marcus was handling it. Forged documents, fake evaluations, a care facility by Christmas. They weren't just planning to take my house. They were planning to lock me away and make Tyler think it was for my own good. I kept reading even though every word felt like a punch. August 28th, 2024. Brad, are you really going through with this? Vanessa, of course. I've already burned through the $33,000 his dad kicked in for the wedding. Plus, the legal paperwork's easier if I'm actually married to Tyler. Brad, what if he finds out? Vanessa, he won't. Tyler's too trusting. too kind. Pathetic, honestly. Brad, why marry him at all? Vanessa marriage gives me legal standing. If something happens to Thomas, Tyler inherits. And if I'm Tyler's wife? Brad, you inherit from Tyler. Smart. I had to set the phone down. My hands were shaking. $33,000. The money I'd saved for 2 years skipping dinners out and patching my work boots instead of buying new ones. Because I wanted Tyler to have the wedding Marie would have given him. Vanessa had burned through it like it was nothing, like it was pocket change. And she called my son pathetic. I picked the phone back up and kept scrolling, even though part of me wanted to throw it across the room. Vanessa Tyler thinks I love him. He thinks we're going to have this perfect little life. 2 kids, a dog, Sunday dinners with his sad old dad. It's adorable, really. He has no idea. Brad, you're playing a dangerous game. Vanessa, I'm playing a smart game. Tyler gets his fairy tale for a few months. I get financial security. And when the time's right, I'll leave. He'll be heartbroken, sure, but he'll get over it. Nice guys always do. Brad and the old man. Vanessa Marcus says the care facility's already lined up. Private out of state, expensive enough that Tyler will think it's the best option. Once Thomas is out of the picture, the house gets liquidated, the insurance gets split, and I walk away with my cut. Clean. Brad, you really don't feel anything for him, for Tyler. Vanessa, I feel gratitude. He's useful, but love, no. I don't have time for love. I have goals. I close my eyes. I thought about Tyler at 8 years old, standing on a stepladder in the backyard, paintbrush in hand, asking me if he was doing a good job. I thought about him at 16 crying in my arms after Marie died, telling me he was scared he'd forget her voice. I thought about him 2 months ago, showing me the ring he'd bought for Vanessa. His face lit up with hope. And she thought he was useful. When I finished reading, I looked up at Tyler. He was staring at the floor, his jaw clenched, tears running down his face. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it. I handed him the phone back. Something inside me had broken. Not for me, but for him. My son had given that woman everything. His trust, his love, his future. And she had given him nothing but lies. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to rage at her, at Marcus, at every person who had looked at my family and seen dollar signs instead of human beings. But more than that, I wanted to save my son from the wreckage of his own innocence. It's not your fault, Tyler, I said quietly. You loved her. That's not a weakness. That's who you are. He shook his head. I should have listened to you. You tried to warn me. You knew something was wrong. I didn't know, I said. I suspected, but I didn't have proof. And even if I had, you wouldn't have believed me. You loved her. Love makes us blind. He looked at me, his eyes filled with pain. What do we do now? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew one thing: Vanessa Caldwell and her father had underestimated us. They thought we were simple, weak, easy to control. They were wrong. But I'm getting ahead of myself. On that Saturday morning, the morning I swept up broken glass and nailed plywood over my shattered window, I didn't know about Brad. I didn't know about the messages. I didn't know that the woman my son was about to marry had been planning to destroy us from the very beginning. All I knew was that in 6 hours I would walk into a room full of strangers and pretend to be happy. I would smile. I would shake hands. I would watch my son marry a woman I didn't trust. And I would stay silent, because I was still afraid. The wedding ceremony began at 5 o'clock. By 5:15 I was helping a little girl with a ribbon. By 5:25, my world had collapsed. The grand ballroom at the Sterling Grand Hotel looked like something out of a magazine. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting soft light over rows of white chairs draped in cream-colored satin. White roses lined the aisle, their petals scattered across the marble floor. A string quartet sat in the corner, playing something soft and elegant. 300 guests filled the room. Women in silk dresses and diamond earrings, men in tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly pension. The air smelled like expensive perfume and fresh flowers. I didn't belong there. Everyone could see it. I sat in the third row, not the first. Marcus had insisted the front rows were reserved for immediate family only. Helen sat beside him in the first row, silent, her hands folded in her lap, her shoulders tight. She didn't turn around to look at me. Tyler stood at the altar in a navy blue suit, his hands clasped in front of him, his smile nervous. He looked young. Too young. I wanted to walk up there, straighten his tie, tell him to breathe. But I stayed in my seat. I stayed quiet. The music swelled. Vanessa appeared at the back of the ballroom in a white gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. She walked down the aisle slowly, her chin high, her smile serene. Every eye in the room turned to watch her. Tyler's face softened when he saw her. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world. I looked at her and saw a liar. The officiant cleared his throat and began. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Tyler Bennett and Vanessa Caldwell. I tried to focus on the words. I tried to pretend this was a normal wedding, that my son was marrying a woman who loved him, that I hadn't spent the morning sweeping up broken glass, that I wasn't sitting here in a cheap charcoal suit surrounded by strangers who looked at me like I was something they'd scraped off their shoes. At 5:15, everything changed. Emma Vanessa's 6-year-old niece stood near the altar holding a small basket of rose petals. She was the flower girl, tiny, blonde, shy, overwhelmed by the 300 pairs of eyes watching her. The ribbon tied around her wrist slipped loose and fell to the floor. It rolled toward my feet. Emma's face crumpled. She started to cry, soft hiccuping sobs that cut through the quiet. I stood up. I didn't think about it. I just moved. I walked to the front of the room, bent down and picked up the ribbon. I knelt beside Emma, bringing myself to her eye level. "Hey, sweetheart," I said quietly. "It's okay. Look good as new." I tied the ribbon back around her wrist, making sure the bow was neat and secure. She looked up at me with wide, teary blue eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. I smiled. "You're doing great." She smiled back. A few guests murmured, soft, awes, gentle laughter. I glanced at Tyler. He was watching me, and for just a second he smiled. A real smile. The kind I hadn't seen from him in months. For just a moment, I thought maybe everything would be okay. Then Marcus moved. He stood up from the front row and walked toward me, his face twisted with anger. His voice rang out across the ballroom. "Get your hands off that child." I stood quickly, my heart pounding. "I was just helping." "You're not a guest, Thomas." His voice was cold, deliberate, designed to carry across every corner of that room. "You're just help. A mechanic. This is a high-class wedding." The murmurs turned to whispers. I felt 300 pairs of eyes turn toward me. My face went hot. "Well, Marcus, I was only trying to—" He cut me off, stepping closer. "Look at you. Cheap suit, rough hands, grease still under your nails probably. You're embarrassing everyone here with your working class touching." The word hung in the air like something rotten. Working class. Like it was a curse. I heard the whispers grow louder. A woman 2 rows back leaned toward her husband and said, loud enough for me to hear, "Isn't that the father? Why is he sitting in the 3rd row?" Someone else murmured, "Poor taste." A man in the front row turned his head away. A few people stared openly, their faces a mix of pity and disgust. I wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow me whole. But I looked at Tyler instead. I looked at my son standing 10 feet away, and I waited for him to say something. To tell Marcus to stop. To defend me. Tyler opened his mouth. Then he closed it. His eyes darted to Vanessa. "A man like you doesn't belong at a wedding like this." Marcus continued, his voice rising. "You should have stayed home, Thomas." My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Tyler again, silently begging him. "Say something. Please. That someone should tell this man to sit down," Marcus said louder now, playing to the crowd, "before he ruins the whole ceremony." The whispers grew into a low buzz. People shifted in their seats. Most kept staring, waiting to see what would happen next. Vanessa stepped closer to Tyler. She touched his arm, lightly leaned in, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Tyler's face changed. His expression hardened. His jaw tightened. And then he looked at me. "Dad," he said. His voice was quiet, flat. "Maybe you should sit down." I stared at him. I didn't move. "Dad?" His voice cracked just slightly. "You're embarrassing me." Silence. Absolute crushing, suffocating silence. 300 people held their breath. The string quartet stopped playing mid-note. The officiant froze. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim. I looked at my son. I searched his face for some sign that he didn't mean it. But he wouldn't look at me. He stared at the floor, his hand still on Vanessa's arm. Marcus laughed. Loud and triumphant. Vanessa smiled. Tyler forced a weak smile and laughed softly along with them. And I understood. This was my son, the child I had raised alone after Marie died, the boy I had taught to ride a bike in our driveway on a hot summer afternoon, running beside him until my lungs burned. The boy I had taught to change a tire at 16, kneeling beside him on the gravel shoulder of Route 74, showing him how to be self-reliant. The boy who had stood in the doorway of the hospital room when his mother's heart stopped, who had collapsed into my arms and sobbed, who had whispered, I don't know how to do this without her. And I had held him and promised we'll do it together. The boy I had worked 60-hour weeks to feed, to clothe, to send to college. The boy I had loved more than anything in this world. And he had just chosen them over me. I bent down slowly. I picked up Emma's ribbon from where it had fallen again and set it carefully on the chair. I straightened, I turned, and I walked. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I didn't look back. I walked down the center aisle of that ballroom past 300 silent faces. No one spoke. No one moved. A woman in the fourth row covered her mouth with her hand. A man near the back looked down at his shoes. The string quartet didn't resume playing. The only sound was the echo of my footsteps on the marble floor. I reached the double doors at the back of the ballroom. I pushed them open. I stepped through, and the doors closed behind me with a soft final click. Behind me, muffled by the heavy wood, I heard the officiant clear his throat. Shall we continue? I kept walking down the hallway, past the elevator, out into the parking lot. The September air was warm and heavy. I got into my truck, started the engine, and sat there for a long moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I walked out of that ballroom believing I'd lost my son forever. I didn't know that within 3 hours I would discover the real reason Marcus wanted me silent, or that at midnight, Helen Caldwell would knock on my door and hand me the weapon I needed to fight back. I sat in the hotel lobby for 20 minutes staring at nothing before I realized I had nowhere else to go. I didn't leave the hotel after I walked out of the ceremony. I couldn't. I sat on a leather chair near the lobby fountain, my hands folded in my lap, watching people pass by without seeing them. Couples laughing, families gathering for photos, bellhops wheeling luggage carts across the polished floor. The world kept moving. I felt frozen. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. Home felt too far, too empty. Tyler was somewhere in this building, married now, surrounded by 300 people who had just watched him choose his wife's family over his own father. And I was sitting in a lobby alone, invisible. At 6 o'clock, I heard applause from the ballroom, muffled but unmistakable. The ceremony had ended. They had finished without me. Tyler and Vanessa were married. 15 minutes later, the guests began to spill out into the hallway for the cocktail hour. I stood slowly and moved to stand near a pillar, half-hidden watching. Men in expensive suits, women in glittering dresses, waiters circulating with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Everyone smiled. Everyone laughed. No one looked at me. A few people glanced in my direction and quickly looked away embarrassed. They'd seen what happened. They'd watched Marcus humiliate me. They'd heard Tyler tell me I was embarrassing him. And now they didn't know what to say. So they said nothing. They turned their backs and walked the other way. I thought about leaving. I thought about getting in my truck and driving home and never speaking to any of them again. But then I thought Tyler is still my son. At the very least, I should congratulate him. So I stayed. At 6:30, the doors to the reception hall opened. I followed the crowd inside, keeping to the edges, trying not to be noticed. The room was stunning. 300 guests sat at round tables draped in white linen, each one decorated with tall centerpieces of white roses and candles. Champagne glasses glinted under the chandeliers. A band was setting up on a small stage at the front of the room. Tyler and Vanessa sat at the head table on a raised platform, surrounded by Marcus, Helen, the bridesmaids and the groomsmen. They looked perfect, untouchable, like a photograph come to life. I scanned the room, looking for my name. I found it at a table in the far back corner near the restroom hallway, the worst seat in the room. A small white card with elegant script, Thomas Bennett, table 8, 8 chairs, only one name card. Mine. Marcus had seated me at a table meant for 8 people, alone. No one else had been assigned to sit with me. It wasn't an oversight. It was a message. I sat down slowly. The chair felt too big. The table felt too wide. I looked around at the other tables, groups of friends, families, co-workers, all of them laughing and talking. And then I looked at my table, empty, silent, a public declaration that I didn't belong. At 6:45, dinner was served. Waiters brought out plates of food I didn't recognize. Some kind of chicken with sauce-roasted vegetables, a piece of bread I didn't touch. I picked at the food without tasting it. I looked up at the head table. Tyler was talking to one of the groomsmen, smiling, laughing. Vanessa leaned over and whispered something in his ear. He laughed louder. He didn't look at me, not once. At 7 o'clock, the toast began. Marcus stood first, raising his glass. The room quieted. He smiled, that practiced professional smile I'd come to hate. To my brilliant daughter, he began his voice smooth and warm. Vanessa, You've always been a force of nature. You've always known what you want and how to get it." He paused. His eyes swept across the room and landed on me for just a second. Just long enough for me to understand how to get it. He raised his glass higher. "To Tyler and Vanessa, may you have everything you deserve." Everyone clapped. I didn't move. Next, the maid of honor stood, one of Vanessa's friends from college, a young woman with perfect hair and a voice like honey. She talked about Vanessa's kindness, her generosity, her beauty. It was sweet. It was empty. It meant nothing. Then the best man stood and told a story about Tyler getting lost on a camping trip in college. Everyone laughed. Tyler laughed. I'd never heard that story before. I waited. I kept waiting. But no one called my name. No one asked me to speak. In most weddings, the father of the groom gives a toast. It's tradition. But Marcus hadn't invited me to speak. He'd erased me from that too. I sat at my empty table invisible. At 7:15, the band started playing. Tyler and Vanessa stood and walked to the center of the dance floor for their first dance. The lights dimmed. Everyone watched. I watched too from my corner table in the back, surrounded by empty chairs. At 7:20, Marcus walked over to my table. He didn't sit down. He stood beside me, his hands in his pockets, his voice low and quiet so no one else could hear. "You should leave," he said. I looked up at him. "I'm Tyler's father. You're an embarrassment." His tone was flat matter of fact. "You're making people uncomfortable. Have some dignity and go." "Where's Tyler?" I asked. "I want to talk to him." "Tyler doesn't want to see you," Marcus said. "He told me so himself. You humiliated him in front of everyone. He asked me to make sure you left quietly." I felt something crack inside my chest. "I didn't—" "Go home, Thomas." Marcus leaned down slightly, his face close to mine. "There's no place for you here." I looked past him toward the head table. Tyler was still there laughing with the groomsmen, his back to me. He hadn't looked my way once since I'd sat down. Not once. Marcus straightened and walked away without another word. I sat there for another 10 minutes. I watched Tyler laugh. I watched Vanessa smile. I watched 300 people celebrate a marriage I wasn't part of. And then I stood up. I walked toward the exit slowly, carefully, like I was afraid the floor might collapse beneath me. No one looked at me. No one said goodbye. I passed tables full of people I didn't know, people who had watched me get humiliated, and now pretended I didn't exist. Near the door, I passed Helen. She was standing alone, a glass of wine in her hand, her eyes red and swollen. She'd been crying. She looked at me as I walked past. Her lips moved barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." I didn't understand what she meant. I didn't stop to ask. I just nodded and kept walking. I walked out of the Sterling Grand Hotel into the warm September night. I got into my truck, started the engine, and drove home in silence. No radio, no tears, just emptiness. I had been erased from the ceremony, from the reception, from my son's life. I thought that was the worst pain I'd ever felt. Then I walked into my house and saw the broken window. I pulled into my driveway at 8:30. The house was dark, empty, like everything else in my life right now. I sat in the truck for a moment, staring at the front door. The porch light was off. I'd forgotten to leave it on that morning. The windows were black. No movement, no sound, just silence. I got out slowly, my legs stiff from the hour-long drive. The September night was warm and heavy, the air thick with the smell of cut grass and distant barbecue smoke from a neighbor's house. Somewhere down the street I heard laughter. A family gathering maybe, a birthday party, life going on like nothing had happened. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air smelled stale, closed in. I flicked on the light. The living room looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. The couch, the coffee table, Marie's photograph on the mantelpiece. But something felt different. Violated. Like the house itself knew what had been done to it. I walked down the hallway to my study. The plywood I'd nailed over the broken window that morning was still there, a crude patch of raw wood against the cream-colored wall. I stood in the doorway staring at it. The desk was still cluttered with scattered papers. The filing cabinet still stood open. The shelf beside the desk was still empty. The silver pocket watch Marie had given me for our 20th anniversary was gone. And the red folder. The one with the house deed, the life insurance policy, Marie's, Will Tyler's birth certificate. All of it. Gone. I sat down at the desk and pulled open the top drawer. The threatening note was still there, folded once the block letters stark and cold against the white paper. I unfolded it and read it again. "We know about the insurance money. We know about the house. Don't fight this. Don't call the police. If you want your son safe, you'll sign when we tell you to sign. This is only the beginning. I read it slowly this time, carefully, and for the first time since I'd found it that morning, I understood. This wasn't random. This wasn't just theft. This was Marcus. This was Vanessa. This was all part of the plan. The humiliation at the wedding wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. Make me look unstable, paranoid, unhinged. Make 300 people watch me get thrown out of my own son's wedding. Make Tyler side against me. Make everyone believe I was losing my mind. And then, once I looked crazy enough, they'd take the house. They'd forge documents. They'd declare me incompetent. They'd put me in a memory care facility somewhere far away, and Tyler would believe it was for my own good. And by the time anyone realized what had happened, it would be too late. I set the note down and stared at it. And then I thought about Tyler. Tyler had known. He must have known. The way he'd looked at me tonight, that wasn't surprise. That was guilt. I thought back over the past few months. The wedding planning, the dinners with Marcus and Vanessa, Tyler asking me to give Marcus a chance, Tyler defending Vanessa when I expressed doubts. And I remembered something. 3 weeks ago, I'd stopped by Tyler's apartment to drop off a gift Marie had left for him in her will. A small wooden box with his baby shoes inside. I'd let myself in with a spare key. Tyler was on the phone in his bedroom. I'd heard Marcus's voice through the door, faint but unmistakable. "Are you sure this will work?" Marcus had asked. And Tyler had laughed, a nervous, uncertain laugh, and said, "I think so. He'll be surprised, but it'll be good for him." At the time, I'd thought they were talking about a surprise party, or a gift, something harmless, but now I understood. Tyler had known Marcus was planning something for me. He hadn't known the details, not the break-in, not the forged documents, not the memory care facility, but he'd known Marcus was planning something. And instead of asking questions, instead of protecting me, he'd chosen to trust Marcus. He'd chosen silence. And tonight, when Marcus humiliated me in front of 300 people, Tyler had sided with them. Not because he was evil, not because he hated me, but because he'd already made his choice weeks ago. He'd chosen Vanessa. He'd chosen Marcus's approval. He'd chosen the easy path. My son had helped them rob me, not with tools, but with silence, with betrayal. I folded the note and put it back in the drawer. My hands were shaking. At 9 o'clock, I stood up and walked to the mantelpiece in the living room. I picked up the framed photograph of Marie and me on our wedding day. 1991. She was 28. I was 31. We were standing in front of the church, her hand in mine, both of us smiling, like we'd just won the lottery. I sat down on the couch holding the photograph in both hands. "Marie," I said quietly, my voice cracking. "I failed him." The house was silent. "I failed you," I continued. I raised him to be honest, kind, loyal, and tonight he laughed when they humiliated me. What did I do wrong? No answer. Just the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. "They took your watch," I said. "The one you gave me for our 20th anniversary. The one you had engraved. They took the deed to our house. They took our son." My voice broke. I pressed the photograph to my chest and bent forward, my shoulders shaking. And for the first time that day, the first time since I'd woken up at 4:30 that morning, I cried. At 9:30, the phone rang. I wiped my eyes and picked it up. "Hello? Thomas, are you all right?" Dorothy Klein's voice sharp with worry. "I've been worried sick. I saw your truck pull in an hour ago and I almost came over." "I'm fine, Dorothy." "Don't lie to me," she said. "What happened at the wedding?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't put it into words. "Thomas, I need to sleep," I said finally. "I'll explain tomorrow. I'm going to call the police about the break-in," she said. "You should have called them this morning. This is serious." "No," I said quickly. "Don't, please. Give me one day." "Thomas." "Please, Dorothy." There was a long pause. Then she sighed. "One day, but if you don't call them tomorrow, I will. Thank you." I hung up before she could say anything else. I sat on the couch for another 20 minutes staring at nothing. Then I stood, turned off the lights, and went to bed. I thought I'd lie awake until dawn. I thought the anger and the pain would keep me up all night replaying every moment of the day over and over in my head. But instead, I fell asleep almost immediately. A deep, dreamless sleep. The sleep of the defeated. I didn't know that 3 hours later at 11 o'clock that night, Helen Caldwell would knock on my door with 5 years of evidence and a confession that would change everything. The knock came at 11 o'clock. 3 sharp raps that pulled me out of a sleep I didn't remember falling into. I sat up in bed, disoriented, my heart pounding. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then I heard it again. 3 more knocks, urgent but not loud. I got out of bed, pulled on my robe, and walked to the front door. I turned on the porch light and looked through the peephole. Helen Caldwell stood on my doorstep. Her eyes were red and swollen. She was holding a large cardboard file box in both arms. I opened the door. "Helen." "Thomas, please." Her voice was raw, desperate. "I need to talk to you. I should have done this months ago." I stared at her, confused. "Helen, it's 11 o'clock. Please," she said again, "before I lose my nerve." I stepped aside and let her in. We went to the kitchen. She set the box down on the table with a heavy thud and sat down across from me. Her hands were shaking. "What's going on?" I asked. She opened the box. Inside were file folders, photographs, a USB drive, stacks of printed emails. Everything was organized, labeled dated. She'd been preparing for this. She pulled out a folder labeled Bennett Property Scheme and opened it. Inside were documents I'd never seen before, legal papers with my name on them, signatures that looked like mine but weren't. "Marcus has been planning to take your house for 6 months, Helen said quietly, "since Tyler proposed." I stared at the documents. My hands started to shake. Helen pulled out more folders. Real estate fraud, 2015 to 2018. Victims. Second family. She spread them across the table like cards in a poker game. June of this year. She began, her voice steady, now clinical. Marcus hired a lawyer named Paul Greenberg to draft forged power of attorney documents. In July, he arranged for a fake medical evaluation to declare you incompetent. Thursday night, Vanessa stole your house key at the rehearsal dinner. Saturday morning, while you were at the wedding, they broke into your house and took your documents. After the wedding, Marcus was going to present the forged papers and transfer your house into a trust, the Tyler and Vanessa Trust, controlled by Marcus. She pulled out a photograph. Marcus standing in front of a house I didn't recognize his arm around a woman I'd never met. A boy stood beside them, maybe 12 years old. Diana Porter, Helen said. 38, and their son Lucas, 12 years old. Marcus has been supporting them for over a decade. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the photograph. "Tyler," I finally managed. "Did Tyler know about this?" Helen nodded slowly. "I heard them talking 3 weeks ago. Tyler asked, 'Dad, are you sure this will work?' And Marcus said, 'Your father won't know until it's too late.'" My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. "But," Helen continued quickly, "Marcus told Tyler it was a surprise, a way to make you feel like part of the family. Tyler didn't ask questions. He trusted Marcus. He's guilty of being a fool, Thomas, not a criminal." I put my head in my hands. Helen kept talking. "I started gathering evidence 5 years ago, after Marcus destroyed my parents." I looked up. "Your parents—" She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. 2009, my father, Frank Mitchell, had a stroke. He was 72. Marcus convinced him to transfer his house into a joint investment fund. It was legal. It was theft. My mother, Barbara, died 2 years later from the stress. My father died in 2015. I brought Marcus into their lives. I killed them. Her voice broke. She covered her face with her hands. "I've been collecting evidence ever since," she whispered. 127 emails, 43 audio recordings, financial statements, forged documents. I found out about Diana and Lucas in 2021. I've been waiting for the right moment to act. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" I asked. "Because I was afraid," she said. "Marcus threatened me. He said if I ever betrayed him, he'd hurt Vanessa. I know she's terrible. I know what she's become, but she's my daughter." She wiped her eyes and looked at me. "Why now?" "Because tonight I watched Marcus destroy you in front of 300 people, and I saw my daughter smile, and I realized she's lost. Marcus killed her soul years ago, the same way he killed my parents. I can't let him kill you too." I sat back in my chair, staring at the evidence spread across my kitchen table. "What do we do?" I asked finally. Helen leaned forward. "We call the police. We give them everything. We burn Marcus's world to the ground." "What about Tyler?" Her expression hardened. "If Tyler was part of this, he has to face the consequences." "He's my son," I said quietly. "I know," Helen said, "but tonight he made his choice. Now it's our turn to choose." We sat in silence for a long moment. Then Helen pulled out her phone. "I'm calling a locksmith," she said, "right now, before Marcus tries to come back." At 2 o'clock in the morning, a locksmith arrived and changed every lock on my house. Front door, back door, side door. Helen stood beside me on the porch watching him work. When he was done, Helen handed me the box of evidence. "Keep this safe," she said. "Tomorrow we fight back." She walked to her car, got in, and drove away. I went back inside and sat at the kitchen table. I pulled out the folders one by one and read through them. Emails between Marcus and Paul Greenberg discussing forged signatures. Audio recordings of Marcus laughing about the old man and easy money. Financial statements showing Marcus's debts, $2.5 million. Photographs of Diana and Lucas. Documents with my forged signature. And I thought about Tyler. Tyler wasn't a mastermind. He was a fool. A coward who had chosen comfort over truth. He'd heard Marcus talk about a plan, and he'd chosen not to ask questions. He'd chosen to trust his wife's father instead of protecting his own. And when he discovered Vanessa's true nature, when he realized he'd been used, that she didn't love him, that she'd burned through $33,000 of my money like it was pocket change, it would destroy him. Part of me wanted to protect him from that pain. Part of me wanted to spare him the truth, to let him keep believing that his wife loved him, that his marriage was real. The rest of me wanted him to feel exactly what I'd felt tonight. The humiliation, the betrayal, the crushing weight of realizing that the people you trusted most had been lying to you all along. I didn't know which part would win. Sunday afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table reading Helen's evidence for the third time. 5 folders, 127 emails, 43 audio recordings. I had memorized every forged signature, every fake medical evaluation, every lie Marcus Caldwell had planted to steal my house and erase my life. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago. I did not care. I was searching for something I could use, something sharp enough to cut through a conspiracy 6 months in the making. While I sat there 30 miles away, my son's world was collapsing. It was 3 o'clock on Sunday the 8th of September. Tyler and Vanessa were back in his apartment Unit 2AC at Carolina Heights, because the honeymoon was not scheduled until next week. Vanessa was in the shower. Her phone lay on the nightstand. A notification buzzed. Tyler glanced at it without thinking. Then he froze. The preview read, "Can't wait to see you next week. Told you he'd be easy." The sender was listed as BT. Tyler picked up the phone. He knew the passcode. She had never hidden it. He unlocked the screen and opened the message thread. Brad Thornton. Tyler scrolled up. The conversation stretched back to July. He read the first few lines and felt his heart hammering. He kept scrolling. Every message was worse than the last. July 18th, Vanessa. Tyler is worth potential. His dad owns a house, paid off, worth almost $500,000, plus life insurance. July 22nd, Brad. What about the old man? Vanessa. His father is a problem, mechanic, grease under his nails, doesn't fit the image I need. August 10th, Vanessa. By Christmas, Thomas Bennett will be in a care facility, quiet, managed, out of the way. August 28th, Vanessa. Tyler is too trusting, too kind, pathetic really. Marriage gives me legal standing. Once the house transfers into the trust my father set up, Marcus controls everything. Tyler's hands shook. He scrolled faster, desperate to find something that would prove this was a joke, a misunderstanding, some horrible mistake. Instead, he found an email Vanessa had forwarded to herself. The subject line read, "Bennett Property Transfer, Final Draft." Inside were forged documents, power of attorney papers, with a signature that looked like mine, but was not a fake medical evaluation, declaring me mentally incompetent, and a property deed that transferred my house into something called the Tyler and Vanessa Family Trust, with Marcus Caldwell listed as trustee and sole decision-maker. The shower stopped. Vanessa stepped out wrapped in a towel, smiling. Then she saw his face. Her smile vanished. "Tyler, honey, what are you—" She saw the phone. Her eyes widened. "Tyler, I can explain. You used me." His voice was flat. "You never loved me. You used me to steal from my father." Vanessa took a step forward, her tone turning soothing. "Your father is a bitter old man who doesn't understand what's best for—" "Get out!" She blinked. "What?" "Get out of my apartment now." "This is my apartment too, Tyler. We're married. You can't just—" "I said get out." His voice cracked like a whip. Vanessa flinched. She grabbed jeans and a sweater from the closet, dressed quickly, snatched her purse, and walked out. The door slammed. Tyler stood alone. He scrolled further. He found more emails, more messages. A voice memo Vanessa had recorded 3 weeks ago. In it, Marcus's voice said clearly, "Are you sure this will work, sweetheart? Vanessa had laughed. "Tyler's too good. He won't suspect a thing, and if his father tries to fight, we'll bury him in paperwork until he gives up. Tyler remembered that dinner. He had asked Marcus afterward, "What were you and Vanessa talking about?" Marcus had smiled and said, "Just a surprise for your dad, something to make him feel appreciated." Tyler had thought they meant a speech at the reception, a toast. Now he understood. They had meant the break-in, the theft, the plan to lock me away and seize everything I owned. Tyler sank onto the bed and buried his face in his hands. Thursday night at the rehearsal dinner, Vanessa had whispered, "Just go along with it. It's better if your father learns his place." Tyler had thought she meant social standing. Now he realized she had meant control, silence, erasure. Saturday at the wedding, when Marcus had humiliated me in front of 300 guests and Tyler had said, "Dad, you're embarrassing me." Vanessa had squeezed his hand and smiled. A sob tore out of Tyler's throat. "Oh God," he whispered. "What have I done? I betrayed my father for this." He sat there for an hour, phone in his lap, scrolling through the evidence again and again. Then he stood, grabbed his keys, and drove to my house. It was 5 o'clock when Tyler knocked on the door at 428 Marlowe Street. I opened it slowly. I did not smile. I did not speak. I simply stepped aside and let him in. We sat at the kitchen table. Tyler placed Vanessa's phone on the scratched wood surface between us. "Dad," he said quietly, "I found Vanessa's messages. I know everything. The plan to take the house, the care facility, Marcus. I swear I didn't know the whole plan, Dad." I picked up the phone and read in silence. My face remained cold. Tyler waited, heart pounding. Finally, I set the phone down. "Yesterday," I said, voice low, "you stood there and smiled while he humiliated me. I know. You told me I was embarrassing you. I know, Dad, in front of 300 people, you chose them over me." Tyler's eyes filled with tears. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, Dad, I didn't understand what they were doing. I thought, God, I don't even know what I thought. I just wanted everyone to be happy. I wanted you to be proud of me, and I failed. I failed you." My jaw tightened. My voice broke. "You were supposed to be my son, my boy, the one person I could trust, and you destroyed me." Tyler reached across the table. "I'll do anything. Tell me what to do. I'll fix this." I pulled my hand away. "You can't fix this, Tyler." "Then tell me how to start, please." I stared at him for a long time. When I finally spoke, my voice was barely above a whisper. "If you want to make this right, prove it to me. Don't just say you're sorry. Act." "Anything," Tyler said immediately. "Help me get justice. Help Helen. Prove you're on my side now." "I will. I swear to God I will." I leaned forward. "I need proof, evidence, something that can bury Marcus and Vanessa." "I'll get it. How?" "Call Marcus. Pretend you need advice. Record the conversation." Tyler hesitated. "You want me to trick him?" "I want you to choose," I said quietly. "Them or me, one last time." Tyler looked into my eyes, the same eyes that had watched him learn to ride a bike, graduate high school, bury his mother. Eyes that had loved him unconditionally for 30 years. Eyes that now held nothing but doubt. "I choose you, Dad," Tyler said, voice steady. "I'll always choose you." I nodded slowly. I did not smile. I did not embrace my son. I simply stood and walked to the counter, poured 2 cups of cold coffee, and sat back down. Tyler looked at me with red, swollen eyes and said again, "I choose you, Dad." I wanted to believe it. God, I wanted to believe it. But trust once broken is not repaired with words. It is repaired with action. And in the next 2 hours, Tyler would prove whether his apology was real or just another lie. Before we continue, just a quick note, some parts of this story are enhanced for storytelling and may not fully reflect reality. If you're enjoying this, feel free to share and subscribe for more. But if it's not your kind of story, you can stop here. 2 hours later, my son called me from a cafe parking lot and said, "I got it. I have everything." I sat at my kitchen table holding the phone to my ear, heart pounding. "You're sure?" I asked. "Yes," Tyler said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the tremble beneath it. I recorded the whole thing. 15 minutes. Marcus admitted everything. The fake documents, the care facility, the timeline, all of it. I closed my eyes. "Come home," I said. "Now." He arrived at 5 o'clock. He sat across from me at the same scratched wooden table, where 2 hours earlier I had refused his apology and set him a test. He placed his phone on the table between us and pressed play. The recording opened with the ambient noise of a cafe, dishes clattering, low conversation, the hiss of an espresso machine, Then Tyler's voice shaky and panicked. Marcus, I need advice. Dad's talking about hiring a lawyer, saying the wedding was a trap. What do I do? Marcus's voice came through clear and confident. Meet me at Riverside Cafe in 20 minutes. We'll handle this. The next section was recorded at 4 o'clock that afternoon. Tyler had driven to the cafe with his phone's recording app running in his jacket pocket. Marcus had arrived with Vanessa. Tyler had played his part perfectly. Dad's talking about fraud, Tyler had said, voice rising. About the house. He's losing it. Marcus had laughed. Don't worry, son. Your father won't be able to do anything. He's too weak. We already have the paperwork ready. When we file it, the house is ours. If he resists, we use Plan B, the care facility. I've already arranged a doctor. Vanessa's voice light and mocking. Tyler, your father is pathetic. Always has been. Marcus again. Your father's a mechanic. He doesn't understand legal documents. By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late. Tyler still playing along. But what if he's already suspicious? Marcus casual. Then we accelerate the timeline. I'll file the papers tomorrow. A pause. Then Marcus's voice softened almost fatherly. Besides, Tyler's on our side. Right, son? A rustling sound, Marcus patting Tyler's shoulder. Tyler's forced reply. Yeah, of course. The recording continued for another 10 minutes. Marcus detailed the forged power of attorney, the fake competency evaluation, the trust fund designed to transfer my house into his control. Vanessa interjected twice, both times, to mock me. Tyler asked careful questions, drawing out more admissions. By the end, Marcus had incriminated himself so thoroughly that even a first-year law student could have convicted him. I listened in silence. When the recording ended, I looked up at my son. His eyes were red, his hands were shaking. You did good, I said quietly. At 6:30, Helen arrived. She let herself in through the back door, carrying the same cardboard box of evidence she had brought 2 nights ago. She listened to Tyler's recording, without speaking. When it ended, she nodded once. This is it, she said. This is what we need. We spent the next hour planning. Tyler would call Marcus and Vanessa, pretend he needed help handling me, and lure them to my house at 7:30. Helen had already contacted the police. 2 officers were waiting 3 blocks away for her signal. At 7:25, Marcus's black sedan pulled into my driveway. He climbed out, Vanessa beside him. They walked to my front door and knocked. I opened it. Tyler stood behind me in the hallway. Helen stood in the living room, arms crossed. Marcus saw her and stopped. What the hell are you doing here? Helen met his gaze without flinching. I'm not hiding anymore, Marcus. Marcus stepped inside. Vanessa followed her eyes, darting between Tyler and me. Tyler, honey, she said carefully. What's going on? Tyler's jaw tightened. Don't call me that. I know about Brad. I know about your plan. He pulled out his phone and pressed play. The cafe recording filled the room. Marcus's voice casual and cruel, admitting to fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Vanessa's laughter. Tyler's careful questions. Silence fell when the recording ended. Marcus stared at Tyler, face white. Vanessa took a step back toward the door. Tyler spoke, voice shaking. I recorded this 4 hours ago. You didn't know, just like you didn't know Helen's been recording you for 5 years. Helen stepped forward and set the cardboard box on the coffee table. She opened it and pulled out folder after folder. Real estate fraud, 2015 through 2018. Forged signatures, a second family, Diana Porter, and your son, Lucas. $2.5 million in debt. 5 years of evidence, Marcus. 127 emails. 43 recordings. All of it admissible in court. Marcus's face twisted. He lunged toward Tyler. I stepped between them. Marcus shoved me hard. I stumbled back. Tyler caught me, then pushed Marcus away with both hands. Don't you touch my father, Tyler shouted. Marcus staggered, caught himself against the wall. He pointed a shaking finger at Tyler. You little... No, Tyler said, voice steady now. You're done talking. He turned to me. His eyes were wet. Dad, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I stood there yesterday and smiled. I watched you walk away and didn't stop you. I chose them over you. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But now I choose you. I choose us. Helen pulled another folder from the box. This is the deed to my parents' house. The one Marcus stole in 2009. The one that killed my mother and broke my father's heart. She looked at Marcus. You took everything from me. Now I'm taking it back. Tyler looked at Marcus and Vanessa. You called me a fool. Well, this fool just buried you. At 9 o'clock, the front door opened and 2 police officers walked in. Helen handed over the box. Tyler handed over his phone. I gave them the threatening note from Saturday's break-in. One officer asked to search Marcus's car. Marcus refused. The officer explained probable cause and walked outside. 5 minutes later, he returned carrying my red file folder and Marie's silver pocket watch. He handed them to me. I held the watch in my palm and read the inscription engraved on the back. To Thomas, 20 years of love. Marie, 2011. Marcus and Vanessa were arrested at 9:45. Marcus shouted threats as the officers let him out. Vanessa cried and claimed she was a victim. Neither officer responded. The door closed. The house fell silent. By 3 in the morning, Marcus Caldwell faced 7 felony charges. Vanessa faced 4. Paul Greenberg's law license was suspended. And I sat in my kitchen with my son, neither of us speaking, both of us knowing we had crossed a line we could never walk back from. Tyler had chosen me, but choosing and being worthy of forgiveness are 2 different things, and I still did not know whether I could give him what he wanted. The weeks after the arrests unfolded like a slow avalanche, unstoppable, devastating, reshaping everything in its path. Marcus Caldwell was held without bail. The judge had cited flight risk pointing to the second family Marcus had hidden in a suburb 30 miles away, a woman named Diana Porter, and a 12-year-old son named Lucas. Marcus faced 8 to 12 years in prison on charges of fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and elder abuse. His assets were frozen. His lawyer, Paul Greenberg, had his license suspended pending investigation. Helen filed for divorce the same week. Tyler was called to testify against Marcus in a preliminary hearing in late September. He sat in the witness box and answered every question clearly without hesitation and did not look at Marcus once. Vanessa was placed under house arrest with an ankle monitor. She faced 3 to 6 years. Tyler filed for divorce in early October. The papers were served to her apartment by a courier who knocked twice and left the envelope on the doorstep. Helen Caldwell filed for divorce from Marcus on September 15th. By late October, she had opened a small flower shop on the east side of Charlotte called Helen's Garden. The grand opening was on a Saturday morning. I brought white lilies. Helen cried when she saw them. She said they were Marie's favorite too. Other victims of Marcus's real estate fraud families he had swindled between 2015 and 2018 filed a class action lawsuit. There were 11 plaintiffs. Helen was listed as a witness. Tyler quit his job. He moved out of the apartment he had shared with Vanessa and into a small studio 10 minutes from my house. He did not tell me. I found out from Dorothy Klein, who saw the moving truck. In mid-September, a letter arrived in my mailbox, 7 pages handwritten front and back. The envelope was addressed to me in Tyler's careful block letters. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and did not open it. 3 weeks passed. Every Sunday morning at 8 o'clock, Tyler knocked on my door. He carried 2 cloth grocery bags, milk bread, eggs, coffee, fresh vegetables. I opened the door, accepted the bags, said thank you, and closed the door. Tyler did not ask to come in. He did not try to start a conversation. He simply nodded, walked back to his car, and drove away. This continued for 12 consecutive weeks. In mid-October, a storm tore through Charlotte and damaged the fence in my backyard. 2 panels split clean down the middle. I planned to call a handyman the following week. On Saturday morning, I woke to the sound of hammering. I looked out the kitchen window and saw Tyler in my backyard wearing a flannel shirt and work gloves repairing the fence. I watched him for an hour. He worked steadily, carefully replacing the broken panels with new wood he had brought in the bed of his truck. When he finished, he packed his tools, climbed into his truck, and drove away without knocking on my door. I walked outside and ran my hand along the new fence. It was solid, clean, better than it had been before the storm. Tyler started seeing a therapist. I found out because he left a note in one of the Sunday grocery bags. The note was short. It said, "Dad, I started therapy. I need to understand why I made the choices I made. I need to be better, not for you to forgive me, just to be better. Tyler." In November, the groundskeeper at Pinewood Cemetery mentioned something to me in passing. He said a young man had been coming to Marie's grave every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. The young man brought white lilies, placed them carefully in the vase built into the headstone, and stayed for 20 minutes. The groundskeeper had asked once if he was family. The young man had said yes, he was her son. I did not ask Tyler about it. I simply drove to the cemetery the following Saturday and parked on the far side behind a row of oak trees. At 9 o'clock, Tyler's truck pulled up. He climbed out carrying a bouquet of white lilies. He walked to Marie's grave, knelt in the grass, and placed the flowers in the vase. Then he sat cross-legged and talked. I could not hear the words. I could only see his lips moving, his head bowed, his hands resting on his knees. After 20 minutes, he touched the top of the headstone with 2 fingers and walked back to his truck. I waited until he was gone, then I drove home and cried. Every week Tyler left something on my doorstep. White lilies in a glass vase. A book I had once mentioned wanting to read, The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. And in late November, a small box wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a silver chain for the pocket watch, the one the police had recovered from Marcus's car trunk. The chain was new, polished, delicate. Engraved along the clasp in tiny script were the words, "To Dad. I will spend the rest of my life making this right. Tyler." I held the chain in my palm and stared at it for a long time. I still felt pain every time I saw Tyler. I still heard the words, "You're embarrassing me," echoing in my head. I still saw the image of him standing beside Vanessa at the wedding, smiling, while Marcus humiliated me. I did not know if I could forgive him. I did not know if forgiveness was something I had left to give. In mid-November, Dorothy Klein came over with a casserole. She sat at my kitchen table and looked at me with the same stern, compassionate expression she had worn when she taught 4th grade for 30 years. "You have to decide, Thomas," she said. "Do you want to be right, or do you want your son back?" I stared at my coffee. "I don't know if I can forgive him." "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting," Dorothy said. "It's about deciding whether love is stronger than hurt." I did not answer. In early December, I finally opened Tyler's letter. I sat at the kitchen table on a cold afternoon, with the winter light slanting through the window. I unfolded the pages and read. Tyler had written every detail of his betrayal. He acknowledged the wedding humiliation. He acknowledged choosing Marcus over me. He acknowledged staying silent when he should have spoken. He did not make excuses. He did not ask for immediate forgiveness. He asked only for the chance to prove himself over time. He wrote that he understood apologies were not enough. He wrote that he would spend the rest of his life showing me, not telling me that he was sorry. The final line read, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Dad, but I will never stop trying to earn it." I cried while I read. The kind of crying that comes from deep inside, the kind that empties you and leaves you hollow and somehow lighter. I folded the letter and set it on the table. I sat in the quiet house and thought about Marie. I thought about Tyler as a boy painting the fence with me on a summer afternoon, learning to ride a bike, crying in my arms the night his mother died. I thought about the man he had become and the man he was trying to be now. I did not know yet if I could forgive him, but for the first time in 3 months I wanted to try. I drove to the cemetery on that cold December morning, thinking I would be alone, thinking I would talk to Marie, ask her what I should do. But when I reached her grave, I saw the white lilies already there, fresh dew still clinging to the petals placed within the hour. And I knew Tyler had been coming here every week, talking to his mother. And somehow that broke something in me, or maybe it healed something. December. In Charlotte was cold but not freezing, just cold enough to remind you that nothing lasts forever, not even pain. I arrived at Pinewood Cemetery at 8:45 on a Saturday morning. The sky was overcast, the kind of heavy gray that pressed down on your shoulders and made the world feel smaller. I parked near the oak trees at the west entrance and walked the familiar path to Marie's grave. My breath misted in the air. The grass crunched under my boots. Her headstone was simple pale granite, the inscription still sharp after 6 years. Marie Bennett, 1959 to 2018. Beloved wife and mother. Love never ends. I knelt in front of it and placed my hand on the cold stone. "Tyler's been trying so hard," I said quietly. My voice sounded too loud in the empty cemetery. "Every Sunday he brings groceries. Every week he leaves flowers. He fixed the fence without asking. He wrote me a letter, 7 pages, Marie. 7 pages of apology and regret. I read it. I cried. I stopped. The wind moved through the bare branches above me. But every time I see him, I see that moment. I hear him say, 'You're embarrassing me.' I see him standing there at the wedding, choosing them over me, and I don't know if I can let it go. I close my eyes. I want to forgive him. God, I want to. But I'm scared. Scared he'll hurt me again. Scared I'm a fool for even considering it." The cemetery was silent except for the wind. I sat back on my heels and stared at the inscription. "Love never ends." "Tell me what to do, Marie," I whispered. "Please." I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Tyler stood 20 feet away, holding a bouquet of white lilies and a small wrapped box. He froze when he saw me. His eyes widened. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Finally, he stepped forward slowly, carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "I come here every Saturday at 9, he said, voice shaking. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't know you'd—" "I know you come here," I said. "The groundskeeper told me." Tyler stopped 5 feet from the grave. He knelt beside me, not too close, respecting the distance I had kept between us for 3 months. He placed the lilies in the vase built into the headstone. His hands were trembling. "I apologized to her," Tyler said quietly. "I tell her I'm trying to be better. I ask her to help you forgive me even though I don't deserve it." He pulled the small wrapped box from his jacket pocket and held it out to me. I took it. The paper was brown, tied with string. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was the silver chain for the pocket watch, the one Tyler had left on my doorstep weeks ago. I had seen it before, read the inscription, held it in my hands late at night when the house was too quiet. But I had never acknowledged it, never thanked him, never told him I had received it. I held the chain now and read the engraving again. "To Dad, I will spend the rest of my life making this right. Tyler." "I had it engraved," Tyler said. "I know you already saw it, but I wanted to give it to you myself, if you'll accept it." I looked at my son. His face was pale. His eyes were red. He looked like he had not slept in days. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," Tyler said. His voice cracked. "But I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. I watched him cry and felt something break inside me, not from anger, but from grief. Grief for the time we had lost. Grief for the hurt we had caused each other. Grief for the son I had loved and the father I had tried to be, and the moment when it had all fallen apart. I heard Dorothy Cline's voice in my memory. "Do you want to be right, or do you want your son back?" I heard Marie's voice, imagined but clear, as if she were kneeling beside me. "Thomas, he's our son. How long are you going to punish him? How long are you going to punish yourself?" I looked at the headstone. Love never ends. Forgiveness was not forgetting. It was not pretending the hurt had never happened. It was choosing love over anger. It was deciding that the relationship was worth more than being right. It was letting go of the weight I had been carrying for 3 months and trusting that my son could carry his own weight now. Marie would have forgiven him by now. Marie had always believed in second chances. She had believed people could change, could grow, could choose to be better. I reached out and placed my hand on Tyler's shoulder. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. I pulled him into an embrace. He collapsed against my chest, sobbing. I held him tightly the way I had held him when he was a boy and had fallen off his bike and scraped his knee. The way I had held him the night Marie died. "I forgive you, Tyler," I said. My voice was steady but thick with emotion. "Not because you've made up for it, though God knows you've tried, but because you're my son and I love you. Life is too short to waste on anger." Tyler gripped me tightly, unable to speak. "I forgive you because it's what your mother would want," I said. "Because it's what I want." He held on to me like a drowning man holds onto a rope. I felt his tears soaking into my jacket. I felt my own tears slipping down my face. We stayed like that for a long time. The wind blew across the cemetery. The clouds parted slightly. Pale winter sunlight broke through and touched the top of Marie's headstone. Finally, I pulled back and looked Tyler in the eyes. "It's going to take time," I said. "I'm not going to forget what happened. The hurt is still there. But I'm choosing to move forward, with you, if you'll keep trying." Tyler nodded, his voice broken. "Every day, I promise, every single day." I stood and helped him to his feet. We stood together in front of Marie's grave, father and son, both of us bruised and scarred, but still standing. "Let's go get breakfast," I said. "Lou's place. Your mother loved their blueberry pancakes." Tyler's face broke into a shaky smile. "I'd like that." I turned to Marie's headstone one last time. I placed my hand on the cold stone and said quietly, "We're going to be okay, Marie. It'll take time, but we're going to be okay. Thank you for your wisdom. I love you." Tyler and I walked together toward the cemetery gate. The sun was rising higher now, burning off the clouds. The air was still cold, but it felt lighter somehow, cleaner. The wound was still there. It would probably scar, but scars are proof we survived. Tyler and I had a long road ahead of us. But as I walked out of that cemetery gate, I felt something I had not felt in 3 months. Hope. And maybe that's all you need to start again. Looking back on this family story, I see a man who almost lost everything, not to thieves, but to silence. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I trusted when I should have questioned. I let family betrayal fester in the dark because I was afraid of conflict. afraid of losing my son's love. Don't be like me. Don't wait until your world collapses to find your voice. The hardest lesson I learned is this: family betrayal cuts deepest, because it comes from those we trust most. Marcus and Vanessa exploited that trust, weaponized Tyler's kindness, and nearly destroyed us both. But family betrayal is not the end of the family story. It's a test of whether love can survive the truth, whether forgiveness can coexist with accountability. God teaches us that love covers a multitude of sins, but love does not mean enabling harm. It means setting boundaries. It means demanding honesty. It means choosing reconciliation over revenge, but never confusing forgiveness with forgetfulness. Tyler and I are rebuilding, slowly, carefully. The scars remain, but scars prove we survived. If you're facing your own family story of betrayal, today know this: you are not alone. Speak up, gather evidence, protect yourself, but also leave the door open for redemption if it's earned, not just promised. Thank you for walking this journey with me to the very end. I'd love to hear your perspective. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done if you were in Thomas's shoes, torn between your child and the truth? If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. A gentle reminder: while inspired by real-life themes of elder exploitation and family conflict, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this type of content isn't your preference, feel free to explore other videos that might suit you better.